Welcome to Keep What You Earn, a show for entrepreneurs and business owners who want to scale and build enterprise value without making costly mistakes. I'm your host, Shannon Weinstein. I'm a CFO and CPA who left a career serving Fortune 50 companies in Wall Street to help business owners just like you make life-changing wealth with your business. These episodes are meant to be super tactical and actionable, but please remember, consult your own financial professional before you implement anything you learn in this podcast. Now, if you'd be interested in working with us to do so, check out the show notes for more information about our company, Keep What You Earn Co. All right, let's start the show. Hey, welcome back to the show. I'm excited to introduce you to today's guest, Jim Emerich. Jim is the founder of Backbone CFO, which is a fractional CFO practice specializing in construction firms and manufacturers. Jim and I have very similar mindsets when it comes to the importance of data for sound decision-making as a business owner. After years of serving business owners, he's developed a simplified way of identifying your business's key financial issues and constraints that will help you identify what specific action you need to take right now. He's going to walk through that framework on today's episode, and I really would encourage you to stay all the way through the end to find out more about how to work with Jim and how to really enable yourself as a business owner using this type of tool set. Hey, Jim, welcome back to Keep What You Earn.
Hey, Shannon. Thanks for having me back.
Of course. I love having friends I have here from CFO world, from business ownership, and everything in between. And I know you're going to have a ton of wisdom to share. So would you mind just quickly introducing yourself to those who don't know you?
Sure. My name's Jim Emerich. I'm the founder and CEO of a fractional CFO firm called Backbone CFO. I started the firm in 2022 after spending the prior decade of my life in corporate and private business CFOing in various roles like that, and realized that small business needs us, fractional CFOs, to help expedite growth, to help entrepreneurial businesses scale their company. And I absolutely love what I do.
I love it too. And would you mind really quick, where did you come up with Backbone?
Well, so I didn't actually. So I was working with a guy before I started full time. This is back when I was like side hustling. I didn't really have a name. I was just Jim Emerich, right? And like most of us. And I knew I was getting ready to scale and launch the business within the next couple of months. So I needed a name. And we were just sitting down talking one day, and he was asking me who we serve. You know, from a client standpoint, I was telling him construction companies, manufacturers, and engineering firms at the time. And he was saying, hey, sounds like the backbone of the economy, right? You know, and I was like, yeah, let's go with that. Backbone. I mean, that was the extent of the creativity behind it, but it was enough to stick. So here we are.
You know, it's funny. I didn't even think of that. I wouldn't have even associated that. I thought it was about, and I think this is true though, I think that business owners need to have a backbone. Like you give them a backbone in their business, give them the ability to stand upright and stand confidently and run their business. That's actually what I associated it with. So I think that's really cool.
That I've seen that now play out. I had a couple people early on ask me if we only work with back surgeons. We don't, never have. If a back surgeon's listening, has a great practice, I would love to talk to you because it would make sense that we work together.
That would make sense too, but I do love the name. So I wanted to just uncover that for a sec. So I know that you serve, different industries around the trades, construction, engineering. What have been some of the biggest lessons you've learned from business owners so far as a fractional CFO? And I want to uncover today a few of the different pieces on how you help them and how you kind of guide them through their financial muck, if you will.
So before I started Backbone CFO, I spent 5.5 years working for a manufacturing company that scaled from 4 million a year to almost 40 million. So I was the in-house CFO version of what I'm doing now on a fractional level. And I experienced a lot of these same things. Now, back then I wasn't able to frame it so succinctly, and it was very messy. But when I started Backbone CFO, I saw a lot of the same repeated challenges, issues, pain points. And what I think we're all here for is the opportunity. Right. So it's not just the issues, it's also the opportunities. For me, when we started Backbone CFO, I think, and I still see this as the reality today, I'm so lucky because, and so is our fractional CFO team, because we get to work with entrepreneurs. Now, these people already know how to grow and scale businesses. That's the beautiful part about this. So for me, when we work with entrepreneurs, we get to see firsthand who is really, we have already kind of talked about it, the backbone of the US, somebody who's already growing and scaling and employing people, creating vision around what they're doing. But inevitably, there are some challenges. And around the financial domain, when you're growing and scaling a business, I think the reality of capitalism comes into play, and that is resources are at a constraint. Resources can show up in a lot of different ways. We've kind of figured out over the last 4.5 years, through a lot of ups and downs and failures and some success, thankfully, that these constraints show up in 5 areas. We like to call them a financial control framework. And what we found is that business owners who are scaling oftentimes find themselves in one of 2 places when we start to talk to them. They're either stalling, I'll share some stories about that, or they're in complete chaos mode. One of the 2, maybe both. And for me, as we talk about a fractional CFO, what we ultimately try to do is take you from that point of scaling and stalling, or stalling and chaos, to control. So we call it just a simple chaos to control model, right? And that's our framework. So we have 5 parts of that. We will walk through them, but at a very simple high level, we talk about cash, profit, people, systems, and position as the 5 components that you need to grow and scale your business in a controlled manner. While you're not forfeiting entrepreneurship. This isn't a way to mitigate risk completely, right? You're still taking on that risk as the business owner. But what we're trying to do in the process is say, how can we do that and still have control in the process? So we call that the financial control framework, and we've deployed that to probably 60 some businesses at this point over the last 3.5 years. And it's worked out beautifully. We've seen so much success. We've seen a lot of results. But ultimately, I think, again, the entrepreneurs that need this, I've already figured out that they can scale and grow a business. They have an incredible vision for what they're doing. They just need some parameters to work within and a proven process to get them there.
Yeah, and I think it's more about getting them there faster or more efficiently because they have the tools in the tool belt ready to go, and they can understand.
Yeah.
And basically, when you're running a business, there's an abundance of different problems. It's almost infinite. Like, what could be causing these problems? You feel symptoms and you're going, I have no effing idea what's causing this. But I think if you can create a framework and compartmentalize, like, okay, I think I have a cash constraint. I think I have a profit constraint. You can then identify a lot faster what you need to go do and focus on. Because I think one of the biggest issues with entrepreneurs is the lack of focus, because part of it is they don't know what to focus on. They don't know what needs their attention. But once they do and they have the clarity, it's all cylinders, and then we can actually solve for it. So talk to me about these 5 areas. How do those problems show up? So if you say it's cash, profit, position, like, what does that look like in the chaos state?
Yeah. I think we've been hearing this come up a lot lately, and that is people don't know what they don't know. And entrepreneurs, especially, and let me define who I mean by that at this point. So when we talk about entrepreneurs, we're talking about owner, operator, privately owned business owners, right? So we're not talking about somebody who's backed by a board. We're not talking about VC-backed startups. Not to say this doesn't apply, just who we work with, right? We're talking about the guy in the truck who started with something and now he's got 7 trucks and 3 people per truck, right? Or something like that. Or there was a shop and a lathe or a mill, and now there's 10 lathes and 10 mills and 50,000 square feet all of a sudden, right? So that's what we're talking about in the context. Those folks are brilliant. They know their business. They know their industry. However, in most cases, those people are not trained, experienced finance professionals. So I think a lot of times they just don't know what they don't know. So they see symptoms, they don't know causes. They feel symptoms, they don't know causes. The symptoms tend to be things like frustrating cash control, right? Where it's like, hey, my accountant last month or last quarter showed me my P&L, and all I know is at the bottom there was net income, but I see my bank balance and there's not nearly as much cash as on that financial statement. Or I'm looking at this thing called a balance sheet, and again, I'm seeing this, like, everybody knows equity, right? Return on equity or something like that. We want equity. So that equity thing is growing, but why don't I have cash? And no one's translating this inventory issue or work in process that's constantly growing and building their asset base, but it's not It's not transferring to anything of real value. So I think, again, the business owner is absolutely correct in understanding the symptom. There is something wrong, but what's the cause? And I think that's where the 5 components come in to say, okay, is this in fact a cash issue? Maybe not. Maybe this actually isn't a cash issue. Maybe this is a system issue or vice versa. And for us, when we come in, we do a month implementation with our clients because it takes some time to go through this. This is not something, and I think if you're listening and you're a business owner, you can rest assured that you're not stupid, dumb, inadequate, because this isn't necessary. When we're talking about $7, $8 to $10 million business, $20, $30 million business, where you have $4 or $5 million sitting on the balance sheet in inventory, hey, that's not necessarily a simple challenge to solve. But nonetheless, the good news is it's probably not as hard as you think. And the answer likely isn't you or your accountant, tax advisor who you meet with 4 times a year. It's just not. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I think it's more symptom based. But root cause is where the root cause and getting down to that level, asking 5 whys, things like that, that's going to help uncover the answer.
Yeah, I think that I put it this way where I go, we can diagnose and prescribe, right? So as finance professionals, we can identify, okay, you're feeling this way. It's super frustrating, right? So for example, I can't make payroll. I don't know if I can make payroll, and yet I owe taxes because I have a profit. Like that's not fair, right?
Yep.
That's the thing is like, well, if I'm profitable, I should have money to make payroll. This doesn't make sense to me. So there's this incongruency of understanding of if this condition is present, so must this condition, and not understanding the relationship between these things and how they move together or away from each other. And that's really what the CFO brings to the table is understanding the causality of this is why you're feeling this way, or this is why you're experiencing this condition. But so give me some examples. So for example, somebody is in that position, right? They're going, I mean, this is everybody. I have a payroll left in the bank. I don't know. I have to pick between payroll and the credit card. You know, how many times have we seen that? I have to pick between paying Amex or my payroll. Hopefully not the Amex, guys. But, you know, you have to make sure that, and to some extent, right, they don't know what they don't know. But no, they don't want to become accountants. They don't want to be educated on having to diagnose their own problems. They actually want you to just diagnose and tell me what to do. How many times, right? Tell me what to do. So how do you take the situation from I'm experiencing these symptoms to here is the cause, right? How do you identify which of the 5 to actually move forward with and focus on?
Yeah, so really funny story, and this is absolutely true. So I was doing a talk last summer, about a year and a half ago maybe, and I was talking to a group of maybe 30, 40 CEOs in the manufacturing space. I finished my talk. I swear this happened. I walked off the stage, like stage left, walk down the stage, and I see the CEO like do a beeline to me. I'm like, all right, here we go. We're going to do a discovery call on the side of the stage here. So he comes out to me and he says, listen, Jim, I've been running my business for 30 years, right? He walks up to me. He says, listen, I've been running my business for 30 years and this is how I do it, right? And he actually pulls up his phone and he shows me a picture of a text message from his bookkeeper with a scrap piece of paper. This is a picture of a scrap piece of paper with 3 numbers on it: his AR, his AP, and his today's bank balance. He says, Jim, I've been running my business for 30 years. I'm a $12 million manufacturer. I'm fine. I know I can grow my business and I can run my entire financial system off these 3 numbers. I won't use the gentleman's name, but I said, wow, that's incredible. Like, how is that going for you? And, you know, at first it's like, no, we're going good. We're $12 million. We're profitable. Well, how profitable? Well, you know, we're profitable for sure. Okay. How profitable? Well, I don't really know that, but we're working on it. And I'm like, well, 30 years in, you know, I have a feeling there's a problem. And then we, maybe talk for 15 minutes and I'm just kind of peeling back the onion. I realize, and so does he at this point, that there's a massive question mark around the financial integrity of his business. They're still a client today. So that ended up being a discovery call. And so you're asking the question, what do we do? How do we figure it out? And this is just an example, right? But this particular business had been operating for 30 years. They were fairly profitable. In this particular case, they were about 2 to 3% net profit. about a $10 to $12 million manufacturer in this industry, niche manufacturing, 10 to 12%, probably best in class. So it's not crazy far off, right?
Yeah.
And they have enough volume where cash flow made it work, right? But so going back to the 5-part framework, when we went and we did an analysis, so we do our implementation, we do an assessment on all 5 of these components. Where are you? And it's all relative to where you want to take this company. And this company had been in business for a while, and this owner does want to get out. So immediately there's a gap, because what he realized was that I'd have been running a lifestyle business, which was fine and sufficient for 30 years. And he could have did that forever. But as soon as he made the decision to say, I think this business needs to be attractive for someone else, immediately the game changed, right? Because immediately he needed to know something different. How is someone else going to pay for buying this business? How is someone else going to look at and evaluate the P&L and the balance sheet that my accountant had been giving me on a quarterly basis for the last 30 years? And all of a sudden, what was okay for me is no longer okay for anyone else. So I think in this case, this particular case was a position issue. So the financial position of the business owner, he didn't really look at it for the last 30 years, at least not in light of how somebody else might look at it. And then in addition to that, there was a profitability issue. So it wasn't a cash flow issue. He was okay. They had enough consistent business where they have cash in the bank, but they have significant amount of cash and profitability tied up on the balance sheet, in this case, in the form of inventory, that they couldn't really figure out how to relieve in a timely fashion. They definitely did not have updated systems. That's one of the 5 components that enabled them to show true job level profitability. What product lines in this case were the most profitable that they should take the most risk on carrying inventory for? What was their cash conversion cycle? Zero idea, right? So again, these are all things that they had to create visibility around and understanding, so that when the owner or ownership group went to talk to some external stakeholder, they were able to communicate real enterprise value, not lifestyle business value. And those are two very different things. But again, that's just a story where I had to push back on gentlemen and say, hey, yeah, you're right. You have been running your business for 30 years and it's not been a problem, because you're in Florida half the time and PA half the time, and it works. But as soon as you say somebody else has to understand this business and get in here and run it and afford to run it, now that conversation becomes very, very different. And it took an assertive position to push back on that scenario, and dig to uncover, because of course, as you can imagine, that was not the first thing that came out of his mouth, right? We needed to peel that onion back a little bit. But again, this is where that 5-part framework starts to help ask the right questions, assess the right things. And then I always tell my team, we do 3 things really as a fractional CFO. We understand the current state. We understand the future ideal state, which reveals a gap. And then we take a few actions every month to fill in the gap. That's it.
Yep. That's it. That's simple. And that's what we do as well. It's more about, and because you're not going to solve everything overnight, and you definitely don't have a crystal ball or some like oracle that says, here's what the problem is. A lot of it evolves. And I think a lot of it also evolves with the trust that your clients put in you. Because let's be real, out the gate, everybody tries to showcase the better parts because they definitely don't want to. There's a lot of shame. There's a lot of embarrassment if things are not going well, that they're feeling these symptoms, but they don't want to admit they made a mistake sometimes. Or, I mean, it's hard. We're business owners too, to say, hey, I kind of suck at this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and like, go back to the example I just shared. The 3 numbers he was looking at every day weren't bad: cash, AR, and AP. If you singled those out on his balance sheet, there's really not much issues. But in this particular case, the cash flow and profitability and cash conversion cycle issue wasn't in any 3 of those items. It was in inventory. And he wasn't looking, or he did look. He knew intuitively there was an issue, but he didn't know how to solve it. Therefore, it gives me anxiety looking at this number, so I'm not going to look.
Yeah. It's like a health journey, right? Where you're measuring certain things but not others, and then you let things slip because you're not measuring it. And unfortunately, there's it feels like an infinite number of metrics we can measure as CFOs for a business. How do you help isolate the things that should be measured? Because there is a balance, right? Between, there's so much stuff we can do. There's so many things we can look at. Do you have a way of like distilling it down to maybe a handful of things? Because look at what that guy said. He has a scrap piece of paper with these 3 numbers That's typically all a business owner can tolerate to look at, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
3 to 5 numbers to tell them their financial condition or health condition of the business. How do you isolate the ones that are most important for your clients? Hey there, are you on LinkedIn? I love connecting with listeners and other professionals and business owners on that platform. I gotta say, I'm really enjoying it. So if we're not already connected, make sure you send me a connection request after this episode.
Number one, I think really is understanding the current state of the business and the goals of their particular business owner. Because the
Hmm.
truth is, it's not all the same.
Yeah.
Another example that comes to mind, and this again is just relevant to the 5-part framework. We were working with a client a couple of years ago, about a $20 million distributor, and in their particular case, their revenue was very dependent on their ability to have lines of credit where they procured long-term items and they distributed them
Mhm.
for a pretty fixed margin. So in other words, the revenue was very much connected to their ability to finance. Okay. It was really, the market wasn't really the constraint. It was their ability to get financing. So what does that mean? In order to grow revenue at a fairly fixed profit margin, which is good news, what we needed to do was focus on getting financing. Okay. So in this particular case, the company had about a $2 million equipment line of credit with a bank, which is great. They knew in their market, if they could increase that line of credit capacity, they could increase sales, thus increasing profit. Pretty self-explanatory. Now, here's the challenge. In this particular case, there was a financial covenant on this client of ours that they were missing. It was a debt to equity covenant. I forget the exact. It was probably 1 to 5, if I remember correctly, and they were missing it. In other words, what was happening was their equity or retained earnings wasn't sufficiently matching to the bank's expectations the debt that was on the books, namely AP, because they carried a ton of AP. They were financing all this equipment and just selling it, right? So
Right.
the distributor. What we had to do was go in and tell a story, right? Now, in this case, we had to do two things. One, we had to push back on the business owner to manage distributions, right? Because there was a little bit too much of that going on, at least not planned enough. And then number two, this business owner, as most entrepreneurs do, they started a second business, and he started it with the liquid value
Liquidity.
of the first business. And
Yep.
again, that's showing up in distribution. So he's taking draws to fund this other thing, which is fine because that was a good investment, but it was negatively impacting this covenant. So we had to go in and in this particular case, again, this is not for every client. We had to say, okay, this is a key metric, debt to equity. We got to focus on retained earnings, one, and two, we got to tell a story to the bank that, hey, yes, this was out of covenant, but look at this other balance sheet over here that, by the way, is 100% owned by your client. And that was enough to just that one story, telling that one story was enough to say, okay, we're willing then, because we know that capital is locked up over here, to take this from a $2 million line to a $5 million line, just with that one storyline that we didn't otherwise know. We had no idea, right? So we just thought this client was taking it out and, buying a boat, right? And there was a little bit of that issue too that we had to manage. So it was both, but then it was this other venture that was off. So again, debt to equity in this case was directly tied or correlated to a goal to get more financing. So it's all about what are the business goals? Where's the business going?
It is, but it's also about how savvy your CFO is to understand, like, I think a lot of business owners also take it on the chin, so to speak, and say, well, the bank said no. And then they hit a brick wall and then they move on
Yeah.
and they say, well, we can't do that. Well, a lot of times the conversations I have with CFO clients is, well, wait a minute. What do they care about? Why are they saying no? They're saying no
Yeah.
because of the debt to equity ratio. Great. What control do we have over those numbers? What can we adjust
Yep.
for? The numerator or the denominator? It's easy. This is just a math equation. It's a fraction. And we go,
Yep.
cool. We either need to increase this or decrease this. What do we need to do?
Right.
And that is in simplifying that, what you did was you broke down and said, okay, debt to equity. We need to reduce debt or increase equity. Well, what's easier? What's more in your control? Well, increasing equity is more in our control because we actually have control of capital over here. Great. That needs to be part of the story. It's almost like when we have an exit and there's all these within control, within the ecosystem cash flow items that are tax advantaged, your accountable
Yep.
plan, your reimbursements, and your owner's compensation that might be, or distributions, and maybe some personal expenses. We won't say anything, but there's some stuff in there that you go, well, actually, the full story is this. this is
Yeah.
being done because of how we want to present, to the IRS or whatever, how the tax forms are formatted. And I think what a
Yep.
lot of business owners don't understand is that it's all about the story you're telling. And it's not about manipulating. It's not about creating a new set of books. It's not about like adjusting things. It's about knowing the perspective someone's reading it from and
Yeah.
saying, this is what they care about or what they're looking for. And here's what I want to highlight and say, no, no, look at this over here. This will give
Yeah.
you what you need. I think that's really a really cool
Yep.
example of how we do that.
And to go back to the framework that we teach through, right? It's all about, in this case, like the manufacturing example I gave as well, having control, right?
Yes.
In the prior life, the same things were happening. There was just no story or rationale behind why. Therefore, there was chaos. What
Mhm.
we did was not change the business model. Business model was working. This is a $20 million distributor. They were very profitable and consistently cash flowing. AP was not something we wanted to reduce. We wanted to increase AP because AP translates to sales. So we
Yep.
were not, the bank just sees AP. They're like, hey, you got to knock down your debt. And this business owner is thinking, again, doesn't know the financial way to say this, but he's just thinking, what are you talking about? I want to double that debt because I want to double my profit if I do. So he's thinking correctly. He just wasn't able to articulate the story and then needed some accountability around how to manage his own cash and through distributions to make sure that the right control was happening. So I think a combination of those things, and again, going back to the manufacturer, is like, hey, you understand the business intuitively. In this case, they were manufacturing gantry trains. I mean, it's pretty complex stuff. But what we needed to do is get a control around inventory balances, right? Because that inventory balance was negatively impacting your cash conversion cycle. And because you have job costing, you didn't really know what inventory to carry that produced the most profit. So it was a double-edged sword there. So again, it was just more about control, understanding the facts, what's the reality of your business, get some visibility around it, make better proactive decisions. And again, that enables now this business owner to do the thing they were already doing with a little bit more control of the outcome.
Yeah. Control and intention, right? To say, we mean to do this. There's a purpose to it versus it being scattered and a little bit emotionally driven or based on habit, right? So I think people get into this like muscle memory state of, well, this is just like how I buy inventory and it hasn't failed me in 30
Yeah.
years or it hasn't failed me yet. And they don't realize the potential of, but if you actually look at the data, if you actually make decisions based off that, look what you can do and how much
Yeah.
faster you can do it.
No doubt.
Yeah. So as you take your clients through this 5-part framework, so I just have this question for you. Do you teach the framework to them? Like, do you help them? Or is this something you guys do internally, or do you actually walk through with the business owner and say, this is how we approach sort of diagnosing these symptoms, and this is what we want you to learn? Like, how much of this do you educate your business owners on so that they can then help you identify those things versus just go, Jim, solve my problems?
You have a cash problem, right? No, it's our first 8 weeks of working with a client is actually walking through this framework entirely.
Yeah.
Now, listen, not every business owner has, let's say, a cash problem, right? So we might go through, and one of the metrics or KPIs that we often look at when it comes to cash, as an example, is cash conversion cycle. Listen, if your
Mm.
cash conversion cycle is really freaking quick and you got a lot of cash in the bank, we're not going to spend too much time on that, but we still want to go through and educate you on what is the metric we're looking at. And like, just as an example, we'll walk through the information, provide some illustration around that, and how do we apply it. But again, if it's a non-issue, we're going to move on. But we do take the first 8 weeks to walk through that five-part component. At the end of the 8 weeks or 2 months, roughly, what we deploy is in most cases, I would say, I'm trying to think back, any of the clients we've ever worked with had an actual financial projection in place. Probably not. And if so, it's very, very few. At the
Yeah.
end of that 8 weeks, we have the 5-part control framework fully reviewed. We understand what the actions we now need to take in order to get the results that the business owner wants. So we're understanding the goals. And then at the end of that 8 weeks, we're coming to the table with a financial projection that lays out the roadmap, potentially 1 to 2 years in the future, month over month, to say, hey, based on what you want, based on the goals of the business and your personal goals, again, current state is here. The future or ideal state is there. We see this gap, and that's okay. Here's where we're identifying all the gaps and all the things that we probably would recommend to do from an action standpoint to get us from A to B. So that's essentially, but yes, we have to educate, because for us, even though cash may not be a challenge today, if you're trying to scale your business, we have a client right now that we're working with that's about a $5 million construction company, wants to go to $25 million. Cash is not a problem today. It definitely will be in the middle of this growth curve, because you and I both know working capital gets consumed very quickly when you expedite growth. So although cash, if you look at their cash conversion cycle today, it's very healthy. We are anticipating that that's going to be a challenge when they get into in the middle of this growth cycle and they double their workforce, they have a bunch of equipment loans, things like that. Cash flow is going to get consumed. So we got to be careful about that, right? So just because an issue isn't present today, when change happens and growth happens, something may become an issue later. Another one that I'll harp on is position. I think especially when you're in the beginning stages of business, this is not something you're thinking about often. And that might be okay. But I think for us, when we talk about position or financial position, we talk about it in light of two areas. One, you have potential enterprise value, which, hey, I want to liquidate, I have a life event, I want to get out of the business, whatever the issue is. What is the actual transferable value in terms of liquidating wealth from your current business? That's only one way to look at financial position, though. The second way, which maybe is more, if you're listening to this, you're a business owner, you're in growth mode today, you're like, I don't want to sell my business. Maybe 10, 20 years from now, what does financial position have anything to do with me today? There is another perspective that you have to look at right now. And that is the perspective of a financial institution. Are you bankable? Is your financial position in a place where somebody on the outside can look in, going back to the example I gave you right with that $20 million distributor, to say, hey, can I give this guy or this girl or this business a line of credit or an SBA loan or a working cap loan or an equipment loan, or maybe there's a bridge loan, a mezzanine loan, maybe whatever it is? Are you capable today of putting your financials in front of a bank or financial lending institution along with a narrative to say, I need X, will you give it to me? And I'm telling you right now, if you're not thinking about that, you need a fractional CFO, number one. But number two, you're probably a little bit arrogant to think that you're likely going to hit the growth goals you have with only leveraging the capital you have internally. And again,
Absolutely.
going back to what we were just talking about in the example of a client we're working with that's trying to 5x the revenue, we know we were able to paint the picture of that 3-year goal to say, hey, if you do this, although cash is not a problem today, 2 to 3 years from now, we're going to have a serious cash problem. You're very profitable, but that cash is being so quickly consumed and reinvested into the next stage of growth that we have a gap. Now, you can fill that gap with one of two things, debt or equity. Mm-hmm. There's only two options. And
exactly.
The way we're going to look at that is, how do we fill it with someone else's money first?
Exactly. And so fundamentally, position is basically how much are people willing to bet on you?
Yeah, right? That's a great way to look at it.
Are you somebody that people would bet on? Is your business bettable? Would you gamble on this business? Because it's the bank betting on you, or it's an investor, or it's a buyer saying, I will generate a return from this business. I am interested in giving this business my money. So basically, are people going, take my money to your business from a customer standpoint and then from an investor standpoint? And I think people are too focused on the customer standpoint of selling to the customer and then making their product look attractive. Now your business is your product. You have to make your business look attractive to a buyer, investor, or lender. And that goes, I think that gets missed a lot in the early stages of business. And rightfully so, because you've got fires to put out that are definitely higher priority, just like stay afloat at times. So maybe it's a cash or profit issue, which might be more of a up the survival ladder, But when you look at the hierarchy of needs in a sense in a business, I think people are less concerned with that and less concerned with process at times. But I think that when you can be mindful of it, at least, even if you're not actively working on it, but you're mindful of the impact, that will serve you so well as a business owner. Just being aware that, hey, if I'm going to go and seek equity, seek debt financing, this is something I need to be paying attention to. Or if you know you're going to in the future, in the next couple of years, 2 years, you guys know they're going to take tax returns from last year. And they're going to look at things. So this is where I get a little preachy with people like our clients, and that say, I just want to pay less in taxes. And they measure the metrics of what we do on how much I saved in taxes. But that's limiting at times. Sometimes you have to pay the tax bill to become the, attractive solution, the attractive, borrower, and you have to prioritize those things. Do you ever come
Yes.
across that mindset where people are definitely are like more short-term thinkers about that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
all the time. And I think that really is the conversion of, if you're listening, maybe you're even a fractional CFO. I think this is where you have to step up. It is your job to step up and push back on a client. If the goal is, I want to take this from a lifestyle business to an enterprise value business, a transferable business, then you have to push back at some point and say, listen, what you think you're saving in tax right now is significantly less than what you're giving up in future value in your business. And again, that's the trade-off point, right? You have to be skillful enough with enough perspective and leadership to say, no, this is actually the cost of not paying this tax right now. This is the cost. It's not
Yep.
the 30% tax liability that you think you have. It's actually forfeiting or removing from the table the future value of sale, bankability, scaling your business, whatever we're talking about. And that's a position issue. That's not anything else but that. So for me, like, that's where this fractional CFO has to be able to, have I would say, the perspective and the leadership capability to push back.
Yes, exactly. And this is where I think being a CPA myself, I say the CPA and the CFO mindset switches, where
Mm,
we become less comparable to your CPA whose job it is, in your mind, probably to reduce taxes this
yep.
year, when in reality, we're more of the enterprise value builders that say, but what if you get an extra multiple? Like, let's talk about that, right? Your profit, it's balancing the priorities. But this goes back to understanding the goal, understanding the desired future state. Because if you want to build that lifestyle business and then you want to pay minimal taxes every year, I go for it. That's your goal, go for it.
Yeah.
Probably not a CFO candidate for me.
Nope.
Probably,
Oh,
because
no.
there's not much I can do where at a certain point can reduce taxes oh so much legally. And then I go, okay, but it's like, oh, what a bummer. We actually had a client that had maximum like record profit for the year and
Mm,
then said, "Ugh, I'm really not seeing the value, Shannon, in your CFO services anymore." I'm like, what? We doubled profit this year. Yeah, we owe so much in taxes.
yeah.
And I go, that's kind of the side effect of making more money. But there's a complete misunderstanding there of what
Yeah.
good looks like to a business owner when working with a financial professional. If you're measuring our success on tax savings, I think you're doing yourself a disservice.
So anyone listening right now, please lean into what you're just saying. What you just said is critical. And I will tell you, the clients that we work with, especially when we get to like the 30, 40, 50 million range. In fact, I have a client, no longer a client, was a client a few years ago, still a good friend. And I'll never forget this. When I saw the first time a 7-figure check written to the IRS, about a $50 million industrial construction company, I'll say.
Hmm.
And and even me, I'm like, oh my gosh, can we do anything there? And he's like, Jim, he's like, this is the best insurance policy I've ever had. And gladly write that check every year. But when you're talking about in his case, the upside of having significant multiples on enterprise value in his organization, that is the smallest check he has to write. That's nothing. So for me, if you're listening and you actually want enterprise value, because that gentleman knows he's walking out of that door at some point with, talk multiple 8 figures in income, right? Only subject to capital gains, not income tax. For him, he's the smart businessman. He's building something that, for him and his family will be forever changed. Whereas most business owners, they tinker around with saving tens of thousands of dollars, doing stupid things every year for tax savings. I mean, you're playing small ball.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, if you're listening to this right now and that's your approach, you are absolutely playing small ball. You can't work with Backbone CFO. I can promise you that.
Amen. And the other thing I see too is being that short-sighted about it. It will hinder you. It will keep you small because you're going to be worried about shrinking your profit on paper that you'll never really step into. I call it big boy profit. You'll never step into like managing a business of that size or growing and scaling the way you want to. You can't, it's
100%.
almost like you simultaneously can't say, I want to grow and scale, but I also want to shrink my tax bill. there's going to be costs associated with that. Like to your point, when you say cash flow will be a problem, we anticipate it. What we do more so is tax planning, and where we say, hey, this is probably what you're going to owe in about 6 to 8 months. Get ready. Start setting
Yep.
aside some money. And I've had clients tell me in March, that was the biggest check I've ever written to the IRS, and I've never been less stressed about it.
That's
Why?
awesome.
Because we have been putting money away since last August.
Yep.
He's like, I've already said goodbye to that $20K a month since last year. I've already pretended it doesn't exist. I put it in a separate bank account in a high yield savings, and I pretend it doesn't exist, and I run my business. And I almost forgot that that was there. And now it feels like the taxes are free because I've just been, it's just been part of my habit. And that's what we're actually aiming for. We want to minimize taxes to the extent possible. Don't get me wrong. But I always say and this is where like our friend Pam would kill me for saying this because she's big on the tax strategy pieces, but I actually have this mentality of certain tax strategies when they consume 8 to 10 hours of your time a month to track and to keep track of it and to like manage getting that, like having the story straight, right? That and the documentation. And I go, okay, it's like 8 to 10 hours a month to maintain. What if you just effing sold for 8 to 10 hours a month to cold calling instead? Would you make more money than you're saving in the taxes? Then is this an efficient use of time? And that's where I just go like, what's the opportunity cost of spending this time worrying about tax savings when you could be growing? You could be doing something that's productive to flourish as opposed to shrink.
So I think it's a great point. And I think it really does come down to what do you want as the business owner? There are many business owners out there that are absolutely okay with and attempting to maximize a lifestyle business. And I guess to those people, I would say, great, you're on the right path, right? But to anyone who's actually interested in building enterprise value, which let's face it, we're talking about the 1%ers.
Yeah.
Even your audience now, I don't know how big your audience is. It's 1% of your audience. It just is. I was reading an article the other day by Chase. It was like less than 4% of businesses ever even get to $1 million in sales. And then out of those, less than 10% get to 10 million. So like we're talking about the best of the best, the hungriest of hungry. One of the things I always say in our company, you've heard me say this before, but I make sure that the people that work for us have this trait, and that is hungry dogs run fast. And a lot of times what I see in lifestyle business owners is they're not hungry. That's not bad. They're not running fast. And that, again, it's a different strategy. It's a different tactic, for us to apply, like as an example, the financial control framework to your business and what you want, that may conflict dramatically with how you actually perceive your business to be.
Yeah. And it's okay if you don't want to run fast, that's okay. But you're talking to a couple of track coaches.
Yes.
So we're like, okay, that's fine. Have a seat and I'll gladly train someone who wants to run friggin' fast. Which is okay. Like all of it's okay. All of it, your goals are valid. Your goals are fair. We're using this in the context of, a lot of people say they want enterprise value, but then they build a lifestyle business. So what we're trying to do is align the goals with the actions, right? That's all we're trying to do is say, take your goals and turn that into what do we need to be doing today to achieve that? And really understand if that goal is superficial because you're saying you want that because you feel like you should say you want that. We go, like, do you really want that based on what you're doing with your time, your resources, your people today?
So true.
And that's what we have to actually align on. I think that's actually our whole job for the first at least 6 months of a client is just figuring out which of these things has to change.
Yeah.
Your goal, I'll tell you what, or your action.
I was talking on a discovery call with a prospect. They're not a client yet. Don't know if they're going to be, but I was on this call last week. This was a construction company out in Arizona. 3 brothers own the company. Legacy business. It's been in family since the 80s. And this guy, and you could tell when somebody's wrestling with this very concept. He told me, he's like, Jim, we've been at 3.5 million in sales for the last 10 years. Like we can just like bank on it. But it's me, my 2 brothers, and they got like 5 or 6 other employees. The 3 of them do everything. And they know they're at that age. I don't know exactly what age, but I could just tell they're at that age where it's like, what does 5 to 10 years from now look like? and they're already contemplating like, oh crap, we don't want to do this anymore. And in order for us to not do this anymore, we can't have $3.5 million of sales. That's not going to work because we need to replace each of these three people, right? In probably a multitude of them, right? Because at that point they've been doing it for 30 years and they're the best estimator there ever was, right? So they're gonna need two estimators for that one guy, and the guy that's a superintendent going to need two superintendents, and the guy that's bidding and estimating and doing sales are going to need two. So he recognizes and he's struggling like, oh man, I know if I make this decision, and he can say it out loud, that we got to, and he said it on the call, we have to triple our revenue. And in order to triple our revenue, we need to do something dramatically different, which is why he was talking to us and a few other people. And they're unsure. They're on the fence. And I would tell you, if you're listening right now and you're thinking, oh my gosh, that's us. I know I could continue this lifestyle business, but age, desire, passion at some point are going to catch up with you, and maybe all three. And at some point, you're going to have to either shut it down or really give it away, which is such a shame. Oh man, it's terrible. So think hard about that. And my challenge would simply be think early about that. What needs to be true for you at a certain point in your life to be able to walk away and truly capitalize on the wealth that you've created in your business.
I totally agree. And this is actually great parting advice. So I want to thank you, Jim, so much for hopping on the show today. Guys, Backbone CFO, go check them out. We're going to put all the links in the show notes to all of Jim's stuff. Jim, thank you so much for hopping on the show today and sharing all that advice with our listeners. I know they're going to appreciate it. And guys, listen to what he's saying. I promise you it'll serve you.
Shannon, thanks for having me. This is awesome.
As you think about growing and scaling your business, it's important to focus on how your operating costs align with your profit and personal goals. Are you allocating your resources wisely? Are your expenses supporting growth, or are they holding you back? Building a sustainable and profitable business takes intentional budgeting and regular assessments of where your money's actually going. Now, with a power session, you can get personalized strategies to help your businesses thrive. Check out the show notes for more information on power sessions and how we can work with you to create the profit plan your business needs for a successful 2025.